Hello everybody. The sun came out just as I went to hit play there, so I think the hat is required. I'm just heading down to get a pot. I came out to do a few kind of small nagging projects today. I think this one will do. So you put them off because, well, they only take a second. I can do them whenever, and you end up not doing them. I have a few of those to get done today. First thing I'm going to do is plant my ginger. And this is exactly the way the ginger's been sitting for the last 3 months or so since I started it. In addition to that, in here I have my sweet potatoes, which I've already taken about 15 or so slips off of. And I think it was early March, it might have been February, I put about 1.5 inches of potting soil in the bottom of this plastic container, and I've got 3 sweet potatoes and 2 clumps of ginger that I just sat in here. I may have nestled them in a little bit, but they were basically mostly sitting on the surface. And so the sweet potatoes have already been really productive, and they've rooted in here a little bit. About a week ago, I took off some slips and they're rooting in water right now. And the ginger has not rooted, but here there's a little growth point on that one. But this is the one I'm going to pot up, and that one has actually rooted, so that is great. But I've got to fill this with some soil first. And I remembered my coffee, but I just realized I forgot some fertilizer for this. So I better go grab that too. So what I usually pick up is this stuff, which is not a brand I promote by any means. It seems to work pretty well. It says approved for organic agriculture, which is why I tend to pick it up. And it's derived from like a chicken manure based. So that one that I just put down is a 468. This is a 437, so not a huge difference. The last 2 numbers are better for things like root development and fruits and foliage, root development and fruits and flowers. And so I think this one is the most balanced. I think this is the one I'm going to use for the ginger. I had a trowel. Aha! Now there are a lot of garden updates. So I'm going to walk you guys around the garden too and show you what's been happening because it's been a lot. But I'm going to be honest. The reason I'm out here today is mostly just to distract myself because I did waste quite a bit of time on social media this morning. We live in Nova Scotia, kind of central in the province, not in our main city of Halifax, but about 40 minutes away. And there are 2 rather large wildfires burning out of control in our province right now, and we live in a fairly small province. The main one taking up most of the news coverage right now is outside of Halifax. And there's been close to 20,000 people evacuated. Last time I checked, I think they said 800 hectares burning right now. It's a much more densely populated area versus the second wildfire that's way down on the south tip of the province, which is much farther from us. But I think that one stated 4,000 hectares burning out of control. A much smaller percentage of the population affected though, because it's not quite as densely populated. That's a really big deal. It's been a really dry spring. We normally have a fairly wet spring and then a fairly dry summer. When it's rained, it's been 1/2 inch maybe. And yesterday, the temperature hit 32 degrees Celsius, which is 90 Fahrenheit. And we had intense wind to go along with that. So that made both of those fires much, much worse. But for the moment, we're all right here. We don't even see the smoke at the moment. And the temperature dropped down quite a bit overnight, as did the winds. So when we have things like that, it's really easy to get caught up in all the online updates. But should also be noted, whenever things like this happen, I'm getting distracted. I really need to put my fertilizer in here before I put the ginger. It has a nice little bit of root though. As I was saying, it's so easy to get caught up in all of the updates online. And you should have a good idea what's going on. That's important, but I probably wasted about an hour more than I needed to this morning. And there's nothing that we can do. But yeah, so I'm mostly outside just trying to distract myself at the moment, and I figured I might as well get some of these smaller projects done because I only have about an hour before the kids get off the bus. And sometimes you just don't have the frame of mind to go and deal with a big project, so little projects work really well to take up some of that time. So I've mixed in some of that fertilizer, and I'm just checking to make sure I didn't bury the ginger too deep. The rhizome's about an inch below the soil. I think that's fine. I'm trying to decide too, maybe I want to put this one in as well. There's a few roots coming off of this small shoot right here. There we go. Yeah, okay. I'm going to put this one in too, I think. Nothing is coming of that one yet. I've grown ginger on a bigger scale in the greenhouse before. But, I mean, I don't sell ginger, and there's only so much that we can use. So I decided to plant it in pots this year. Yeah, I'm going to put all 3 of these pieces in here. Why not? Worst thing that's going to happen is I'll get a big clump of ginger root to take out in the fall. So once it grows up, I might put some pots of short growing annuals kind of in the front just to shade the side of the pot and create some visual interest around it, because these are going to get pretty tall, maybe 3 feet, but they're not hugely decorative. I'm going to give this a good water and probably bring it in at night for the next few nights. Ginger, and I also have turmeric, but I'm not going to plant that today. Ginger and turmeric both, basically, the more heat, the better, within reason. So there's job 1. I've just put it on our back step, and we're going to head up to have a look at, I've started all my cucumbers and all my squash. So those are here sitting on the back deck, and they've just started to come up. There's some new little babies. This is Buttercup. These ones here are Butter Baby. This looks broken. We had a bit of a loss. Oh, there's a new one in the Buttercup. So we've got Buttercup, nothing in the Delicatas yet. These are all old seed though. So not really sure what we're gonna get at the moment. Way more squash and cucumbers than we need. But because this is old seed, I'm basically just planting everything and we'll use what comes up, because my seed box was starting to get a little bit out of control. And I need to try to go through as many seeds as possible this year. There is the Morellii banana, the big red banana. It's not looking nearly as majestic as it was in the fall, but that always happens after a winter inside. And I cut off all the old leaves when I brought it out here because they were just going to get torn to shreds anyway. So the new leaves should be much, much healthier. I do have to plant some gladiolas next, but I think I'm going to take a minute to finish my coffee first. There's the first round of glads. There's just enough room to plant the rest of them in front, and those are the same variety. I managed to find those bags of 30 for I think $9 on sale, which is really good. We also have aquiledias about to bloom, and the delphiniums are looking pretty fantastic. Here's the cilantro and spinach that we planted a couple of weeks ago. The calendula and the sweet peas looking really good. And a mixed row of vegetables that I seeded about 2 weeks ago as well. Hi. I'm sorry, am I too close? Yeah? Or are you mad that the feeder's empty? You probably emptied it, you know. I've learned that it's a complete waste of time trying to keep the squirrels out of the bird feeder. They're stubborn and relentless, and they likely have families to feed too. It's always good for the soul to have some time to sit, drink your coffee when it's warm, and listen to the birds and squirrels. So along with yesterday being by far the hottest day of the spring, we also had our first farmers market of the year. So I've been busy. I didn't get up to filming anything this past week. I'm also finishing up the majority of my piano students last week and this week. But the good thing about that is my schedule opens way up. I had 40 students throughout most of the year. I'm down to about 15 now. And I usually have 10 to 12 over the summer, and that's a really good number. It's enough to help keep some bills paid, but gives me a lot more time to play around in the garden and makes videos for you guys. So the market, We were really excited for the market day yesterday. It was forecasting 27 degrees Celsius. It ended up being 32, and we knew it was going to be a little gusty, but the wind did get fairly intense, to the point where I had foliage in my bouquets. I didn't have a lot of flowers, but I brought edible bouquets. But the wind just destroyed that foliage. And that's something you have to think about at the farmer's market. If you have more delicate foliage, I know basil is a common one. If it's a hot and windy day, it's going to wilt so quickly. So setup was okay. The market runs from 10 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, but the wind picked up, and by about 1:30, we had to take the tops off of our canopies, which meant everything was in direct sunlight with, 32-degree temperature. And that is why I'm very glad our market is in a grassy park and not on like a concrete parking lot or something, because I've done that before and that is a nightmare. So I'm going to show you guys what's happening in the gardens just briefly, but I am going to do a full garden tour this week. The upper garden has been completely planted for about 2 weeks now. So starting on the left, we have asters, pennycress, craspedia, phlox, annual phlox. We have snapdragons, sweet peas, a few direct seeded things, more cress and symbopleurum. We have sunflowers that came up a little sporadically, although I think maybe the birds took out a few of them. There's some self-seeded lettuce back there at the end that I need to harvest actually. This row here is all direct seeded vegetables. So there's turnips, lettuce, other greens, carrots, dill, beets, probably a few other things knowing me. And then we did this one together. We did these onions, and I already showed you the cilantro and other things at the end. And then the perennial row on the end, the scallions, aquilegia, and delphinium. So let's get to work planting these gladiolas next. Well, kids are home. They are occupied for the moment. So we'll get some gladiolas into the ground and then hopefully have a little bit of a succession. It's always nice to succession plant things, 1 to 2 weeks apart. But in this case, it's closer to 3 or even a little bit more, because of course when the soil temperature is lower, things are going to grow a lot slower. So in the spring, it's really common to plant things a week or 2 apart and actually have them bloom almost at the same time. So a lot of these have started to sprout already, and you can see they were sitting like this in the bag, and I'm going to plant it so that the shoot doesn't have to turn all that much. Gladiolas, by the way, usually have a bit of a flatter bottom, but you can usually see where the roots are coming out. And then of course, if they've started to sprout, then it's easy to tell which way is up. But in this case, this is up, this is down, and the shoot has turned sideways. So I'm going to plant it sort of like that at an angle. So if you're somewhere where these can be planted as perennial, I'd give them a couple of inches in between just to maximize their space. But I'm planting them as cut flowers, so I'm leaving maybe half an inch between them. I've been found by children. I'm planting these about 3 inches deep. They can go deeper. I just want them deep enough for the soil temperature and moisture level to be a bit more consistent, and for stability too. Because these are tall, top-heavy plants, so they can easily fall over. There. I don't even need to water those in. There's enough moisture in the soil. Despite how dry it's been and how little rain we've had, when you go below the top inch of soil, there's still a pretty good amount of moisture in the ground. Earlier on in the spring, it was really wet. The clay in our soil holds on to moisture really well. So it's really only recently planted seedlings, anything direct sown that needs to be watered. Everything else is perfectly fine at this point. So I do need to get these sweet potatoes back out of the sun because they have been indoors 24/7 so far. But I do have some older ones that I need to pot up. So I think I just decided that I'm going to do that later and give you guys just a sneak peek of the rest of the cutting garden instead. Starting in the raised beds, we have the feverfew coming on strong in its second year. This is a bonus really. They're just starting to show buds. Not as tall they were in their first year, but we have Magic Lime Green and Tetra White. And these are going to be ripped out after they bloom, but I'm hoping to see flowers here within the next 2 weeks at the most. The saffron crocus, which is perennial in this bed, has started to die back. We're dealing with some weeds that spread by rhizome, but I've pulled them back. I've weeded it fairly thoroughly. I've trimmed back the foliage on the saffron since it was starting to die back, and I planted some straw flower and just a handful of calendula on the front side. This bed is all perennial oregano, which we're going to use for cutting this year and then likely remove that before the fall. This next one is elephant garlic, which needs to be weeded. Some of that is dill, and I see a few calendula seedlings that I might leave, but the majority of that has to come out. And then in front of it we have the French tarragon. By far my favorite herb. We use a ton of tarragon. And then here we have the lilies that we planted together in the fall in the rain, and the orange juice daffodils that are fading. These are going to get moved once the foliage dies back. But this bed has some Asiatic lilies, and then the one in the back right there has the orientals. Lots of foliage on this side, not so much over there, but that's likely the way I planted it. But it was raining and we were rushing after all. Across the walkway we have one patch of ranunculus. This one has the cream, the mustard, and the Bordeaux. I think it was Bordeaux. And this is where most of my fall planted flowers are. We have Rudbeckia taking up about half of that row. The back half is empty. That just needs to be weeded, and then I can plant something else. This one I think was Indian Summer Rudbeckia. This one we have Cherry Brandy and Sahara, and then some Clarkia or Godetia there in the back. It's not very tall yet, but it looks like it's budding up. It had a bit of a rough start, but it's starting to grow really nicely now. I had some fall planted carnations in the back. Didn't take up quite the whole row though, so I just filled in the rest of the space with bells of Ireland around it. The yarrow, coming into its second year, is showing a lot of buds. I'm keeping an eye on this for pests because I did get a bit of a problem with that last year. Snapdragons in the next row are budding up. Problem I'm facing though is some of these are really short. So I may have mixed up the seed packet, but this one is blooming at only about 6 inches tall. So that is a bit of a problem. But the ones at the back are not quite showing buds, and they're closer to a foot tall at this point. And then probably the nicest looking so far is this larkspur. So I've shown this before. That beautiful tall lush row right there is the fall planted larkspur, and these small little spindly ones here are spring planted larkspur. So there's the difference. We have one stalk on most of those, and they'll bush out likely later on, but a lot of these have 6 to 10 bloom stalks on them. Exactly the same seed, just planted in the fall and overwintered rather than started in early spring. We're zone 6, by the way. So there is the cutting garden. In-ground rows. This was built no dig with cardboard, not topped with pure compost, but rather just topsoil, which I had to amend because the good garden soil with compost mixed in turned out to be not that. But we've recovered. And then our raised beds on the other side, and I've been strategically avoiding that pile of stuff, but we'll deal with that later, I promise. Coming around behind the greenhouse, we have my on-deck circle, which is what I call all of this. This is what has to be planted next. Take a moment to look at the Meconopsis, which is a little bit slow growing. I kind of expected that. Here we have, what's this one? Lingholm. Inside the greenhouse is still jam-packed with seedlings, from sunflowers to zinnias, some beets. There's the tomatoes and peppers I set aside so that I didn't accidentally sell everything at the market. We have some dahlia seedlings, some herbs, asparagus, and a whole ton of lavender and a little bit of rosemary. Those need to be potted up ASAP. The cosmos need to be planted out. There's some some Monarda there and some Scabiosa that also needs to be dealt with. But the ranunculus, and I was really worried about this yesterday with the 90-degree temperatures outside. It was well over 100 here, but this open window on the bottom provides a nice breeze. That really helps. So I cut about 15 blooms off of here this morning, made a few bouquets, and even the stalk is budding up. I'm not really all that happy with the size of these flowers. I assume that they're going to stretch up as the flowers open. I'm not sure, but this is the first year I had these grown in the greenhouse, so there's only a few of them just to try. I have also been using these chive blossoms in bouquets because they are so much taller than the chives planted outside. Not a ton has changed with the raised beds. The daffodils are fading. I hid these anemones behind this raised bed to give them a little bit of shade because they were suffering a bit after yesterday. But there are some gorgeous blooms happening here. I've been taking the tulips out of this bed little by little. That's where the daffodils start, so that's going to slow me down a little bit. But I did completely empty the next bed, and it's planted up with dahlias. Stock in crates is a moderate success. They are looking healthy, and for the most part, and budding up nicely, but don't have a ton of stem length, so we'll see. I've already shown you some ranunculus in the greenhouse, but we have our first bud showing color up here, and there's lots more coming. So it's hard to tell from this angle. It just looks like a lot of healthy green foliage, which is good, but there are so many buds. So I think that's all that I've got for today. I'm going to go in soon because the provincial fire marshal person is doing an update here, a live update soon in about 5 minutes. So I want to listen to that. But it's been really nice having some quiet work time in the garden. The breeze is cool, which it was not yesterday. And it's nice to get some of those small annoying jobs done too. So if you've made it this far to the end of the video, I would love it if you would hit the like button and leave a comment. So make sure you hit the subscribe button if you're new here. We would love to see you stick around. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.